The ballroom smelled faintly of polished wood and champagne. Dozens of conversations overlapped like static, bursts of laughter mixing with the clinking of glasses. Waiters moved silently between tables, refilling wine and collecting plates with the precision of a practiced routine. Rachel adjusted the sleeve of her navy dress and forced a smile as she scanned the room. Alumni reunions were supposed to feel nostalgic, not exhausting. Yet all she saw were faces trying to outshine each other. She had spent days deciding what to wear, what to say, what not to reveal. She spotted a group of old classmates near the center, laughing too loudly. She knew them all. Most were managers, consultants, strategists. Everyone here was someone, or at least trying to look like it. Then she saw him, Michael Tan, sitting alone at a table near the back, half in shadow, a cup of coffee in his hand instead of champagne. He looked almost exactly as he did 10 years ago. Clean shirt, no tie, sleeves rolled up, calm eyes that didn't need to prove anything. He wasn't networking. He wasn't pretending. He was just there. Rachel hesitated, unsure if she should walk over. She hadn't spoken to him in years. Back in college, Michael had been the quiet type. Always on time, always prepared, never loud. People respected him but never really included him. He had ideas that sounded too idealistic, too soft for the world they were stepping into. And Rachel, in her ambition, had once told him that he'd never get far if he didn't learn to think big. She remembered the look on his face that day. He hadn't argued. He'd just smiled politely and said, "Maybe I already do." Now here he was, sipping coffee like nothing had changed. She took a breath and approached. "Michael?" He looked up, his smile the same as before, gentle, unforced. "Rachel, hey," she laughed lightly. "I can't believe it's really you." "I was thinking the same," he said. "It's been what, 10 years? More like 11. He motioned to the empty chair. "Sit," she did. For a moment, neither spoke. The air between them felt full of things unsaid. "So," she began, "you still in the same city?" "Yeah, still here. Working at that small firm, right? The one doing educational stuff?" He nodded. "Yeah, still there." She tilted her head. "You never left? You've been there this whole time?" "I like what I do," Rachel smiled politely. "But you never wanted to move on? You could have gone corporate. Bigger clients, bigger reach." He chuckled softly. "Bigger headaches too. Come on, Michael. You were one of the smartest people in our class." He shrugged. "Smart doesn't mean ambitious." That made her pause. "You make it sound like a bad thing." He looked at her, steady and kind. "Not bad, just expensive." She didn't know what to say to that. They talked for a while, small talk mostly. She told him about her work in marketing, about her move to a new apartment downtown, about the long hours that came with a big promotion. He listened, genuinely interested, asking simple but thoughtful questions. But he never spoke much about himself. "What about you?" she asked finally. "You still in that nonprofit education program?" He nodded. "Yeah, we've expanded a bit though. Started working with rural schools, trying to improve teacher training and digital access." "That's nice," she said automatically, though she wasn't sure she understood what it really meant. He smiled. "It's more than nice. It's hard, but it matters." She wanted to ask how he survived financially, if he regretted not chasing bigger opportunities. But before she could, the lights dimmed and the host stepped up on stage. "Good evening, everyone. It's wonderful to see so many bright faces back together again. Tonight we celebrate not just our shared history, but the extraordinary impact our alumni continue to make in the world." Applause filled the hall. Rachel leaned toward Michael. "You think they'll announce that donation thing tonight?" "Maybe," he said, sipping his coffee. The host continued, reading names of alumni who had achieved notable success. Rachel half listened, expecting nothing more than another string of self-congratulations. Then the host paused. "And finally, this year's recipient of the National Social Impact Award for outstanding contribution to rural education and community development goes to..." A small hush fell over the room. "Mr. Michael Tan, For a heartbeat, Rachel thought she misheard. Then the applause hit, thunderous, genuine, warm. Michael froze for a moment, visibly caught off guard. His cup trembled slightly as he set it down. Rachel stared at him. "That's you?" He exhaled, smiling shyly. "Apparently," she laughed in disbelief. "Michael, that's a national award." He stood, embarrassed but composed, and made his way toward the stage. People turned, whispering, clapping. The quiet man from the corner suddenly seemed larger than the whole room. Rachel watched, her chest tight with surprise. The host handed him a plaque. Cameras flashed. Michael spoke softly into the microphone. "Thank you. I don't really like stages, so I'll keep this short. I work with teachers and students who don't get seen. This award belongs to them, not me. Success isn't about what you own. It's about what you leave behind. That's all." The room went still for a moment, then erupted into applause again. Rachel clapped too, but her thoughts were spinning. When he returned, she leaned in. "Michael, why didn't you ever say anything?" "That's huge," he shrugged lightly. "Didn't seem important to mention." "Not important? You just won a national award," he smiled. "I didn't do it for recognition." She shook her head, half smiling. "You're impossible." He looked at her, calm and direct. "Maybe I just measure things differently." The night ended with more photos, speeches, laughter. But Rachel barely heard any of it. As she drove home, her mind replayed his words. Bigger doesn't always mean better. She thought of her office, how late she stayed, how drained she felt, how every win felt temporary. She thought about the look on Michael's face when he said he liked his work. There was no performance in it, just truth. When she reached home, she didn't turn on the lights. She stood by the window, watching the city glow beneath her apartment tower, and for the first time in years, it didn't look beautiful. It looked tired. Somewhere in that quiet, she realized how much she had misunderstood what success really meant, and she knew she needed to see him again. Not for closure, but for clarity. The week after the reunion felt heavy. Rachel went through her routines as usual, but something had shifted. The office lights felt harsher. The noise of constant notifications, once exciting, now grated against her nerves. Her coworkers were the same. Ambitious, competitive, talking in circles about campaigns and budgets. Every meeting started with numbers and ended with numbers. Nothing in between. She kept thinking about Michael's speech. Those quiet words that silenced a ballroom full of people used to performing success. Success isn't about what you own. It's about what you leave behind. She'd heard countless executives talk about purpose, but none of them sounded like that. His tone wasn't rehearsed. It was lived. On the third day, she searched his name online. Michael Tan, Rural Education Project. Dozens of results appeared. Articles, interviews, photos of small schools, teachers holding tablets, children smiling in worn-out uniforms. There he was, standing among them in the same rolled-up sleeves, handing out notebooks, talking with kids, smiling the same quiet smile. He'd built something real, something lasting, and he never said a word about it. That night, she sat at her dining table staring at the laptop screen, the glow lighting up her face in the dark apartment. Her walls were filled with framed certificates, expensive art, and nothing that mattered. She picked up her phone, scrolled to his number from the reunion contact list, and typed a message. "Hey, Michael. Can we meet sometime soon? I owe you a coffee." She hesitated before sending it. The reply came 2 hours later. "Sure. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., Cafe Lumen. Same one near campus. Simple, unpretentious, just like him." The next morning, Rachel arrived early. Cafe Lumen hadn't changed in years. Same wooden chairs, same music, same smell of roasted beans and rain-soaked sidewalks. She sat by the window, watching people rush to work. Everyone looked hurried, important like she used to. Michael arrived exactly on time, carrying that calm presence that never seemed to waver. He ordered black coffee and sat across from her. "Hey," he said. "Hey," she replied, trying to sound casual. "How have you been?" "Busy, always busy." She gave a small laugh. "You?" "Good. Traveling a bit more these days. For work? Mostly. Visiting new schools. There was a pause. She looked at him, then down at her cup. Michael, I owe you an apology. He tilted his head. For what? For the way I treated you back then. The things I said? He smiled faintly. That was a long time ago. I know, she said quietly. But I meant them. I used to think you were wasting your potential. That if you weren't chasing bigger things, you weren't really succeeding. I was wrong. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he stirred his coffee, thoughtful. You weren't wrong, he said finally. You just saw the world the way most people are taught to see it. The problem is, no one teaches us what enough looks like. Rachel blinked. What do you mean? He looked out the window. Everyone's told to keep climbing, to want more. But more never ends. I just decided to stop before it consumed me. She exhaled slowly. And you found peace doing this? Rural education, long trips, small budgets. He smiled. I didn't do it for peace. I did it because it mattered. The peace came later. Rachel studied his face. He didn't look tired, despite the work he described. He looked grounded, like he'd built something inside himself that couldn't be shaken. I saw your interviews, she said softly. You've helped thousands of kids. You built digital classrooms in villages that didn't even have electricity. You made something incredible, he shrugged. It's teamwork. I just help guide it, she shook her head. You're too modest. I'm realistic, he said. One person doesn't fix the world. But if you can change one life, that's enough for a day. His words lingered. She leaned back, crossing her arms. You know, it's strange. I spent years chasing promotions and buying things that made me feel like I was winning. But after the reunion, everything I used to care about feels empty. Michael smiled gently. Maybe it's not empty. Maybe it's just full of noise, she sighed. Noise, that's the right word. He took a sip of coffee. You can turn it down. You just have to choose when. Rachel hesitated, then asked, Do you ever regret not going corporate? You'd be rich by now, he chuckled. I'm rich in the ways that matter. I have time. I have purpose. And every day I see the difference my work makes. That's wealth most people never touch. She looked down at her hands. You make it sound so simple. It is simple, he said. But it's not easy. They sat in silence for a while. The cafe hummed softly around them. The smell of rain drifted in from outside. Rachel finally asked, Do you ever think about what people like me think of you? He smiled, sometimes. But I stopped letting that guide me a long time ago. She nodded slowly. You were right back then. About what? About thinking big. You were thinking big. I just didn't see it. He looked at her, his expression kind but firm. Rachel, everyone's version of big is different. Yours might be about building empires. Mine's about building lives. Both have value. The danger is forgetting which one you're really serving. She met his eyes, realizing he wasn't trying to sound wise or poetic. He was just being honest. When they stood to leave, Rachel felt something loosen in her chest. Guilt, maybe? Or relief? Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the pavement shining. She said, You know, I don't think I've ever really listened before. To anyone, he smiled. Then start now. Listening fixes more than talking ever will, she nodded, smiling back. Can I visit your project someday? Of course, he said. We're opening a new center next month. Come see it. I will. They shook hands, and for a moment she felt an unfamiliar calm. No competition, no image. Just connection. As he walked away, she realized something simple yet powerful. Michael wasn't trying to impress anyone. He was trying to serve something bigger than himself, and that's what made him extraordinary. That night, she opened her laptop again. The awards on her desk glimmered in the soft light, but for once she didn't feel pride. She felt possibility. She searched for volunteer programs, funding initiatives, mentorship opportunities. For the first time, her motivation wasn't ambition. It was gratitude. Gratitude for the man who'd taught her, without ever intending to, that success measured by the heart is the only kind that lasts. And as she typed, she smiled quietly to herself. The apology was done. Now it was time to act. 2 weeks later, Rachel stood at the edge of a dusty road in a small rural town, holding her phone high, trying to get a signal. The air was warm, heavy with the smell of earth after rain. Children's laughter carried from somewhere nearby. A narrow signboard stood ahead. Lumen Education Initiative, Learning Center Number 4. She had taken a half-day off work, something she never did. Her boss had raised an eyebrow when she asked, "Field trip?" He'd joked. She just smiled and said, "Something like that." A white van pulled up beside her, its side panel marked with the same logo. Michael stepped out looking the same as always. Crisp shirt, rolled sleeves, clipboard in hand, and that calm expression that made everything seem under control. "You made it," he said. "Barely," she replied, lowering her phone. "You really chose the middle of nowhere." He grinned. "That's the point." He led her through a narrow dirt path lined with small houses. People waved to him as they passed. He greeted everyone by name. It was clear he wasn't an outsider here. When they reached the learning center, Rachel stopped walking. The building wasn't fancy. Just a simple rectangular hall with open windows, solar panels on the roof, and a few handmade posters inside. But what caught her attention were the people. Dozens of children sat in circles, learning from young teachers using tablets. There were books stacked on tables, maps drawn by hand, and a whiteboard covered in bright diagrams. The place buzzed with energy. She whispered, "This is incredible." Michael smiled. "It's small, but it works." They walked inside. A group of kids stood and greeted them in unison. "Good morning, sir." "Good morning, ma'am." Rachel smiled, waving awkwardly. "Good morning." A teacher came over, introducing herself as Lena. She couldn't have been older than 25. "Michael, sir, said you'd visit." "You work in the city, right?" "Yes," Rachel said. "Marketing, mostly," Lena nodded. "We use some of your company's ads in our digital literacy classes. The kids analyze how stories affect emotions." Rachel blinked, surprised. "You do what?" Michael chuckled. "I told you, everything connects. We teach them to understand media, not just consume it." Rachel looked around again. Some students were drawing posters about recycling. Others were reading aloud in English. In one corner, a few were video calling students from another town, exchanging ideas. "This isn't just education," she said quietly. "This is transformation," Michael nodded. "That's the goal." They stepped outside to the small courtyard. Chickens wandered between benches, and a few mothers sat watching their children through the open windows. Rachel asked, "How did this start?" Michael leaned against a pillar. "A few of us volunteered years ago to bring tablets to a single school. It worked. Kids learned fast. Then we trained local teachers. They trained others. Now we run 7 centers across 3 provinces." She listened, absorbing every word. "And all this without major funding?" "Mostly donations and small grants," he said. "And people who care more about change than credit." Rachel nodded slowly. "You built something sustainable." "Something meaningful," he corrected gently. She smiled. "You always have the right words," he shrugged. "I just try to stay honest." They walked around as he showed her the solar-powered internet setup, the small library, and the volunteer dormitory. Nothing looked expensive, but everything worked. At one point, they stopped near a group of children drawing on a wall-sized paper. A boy ran up to Rachel holding a rough sketch of a tablet. "Ma'am, look. I drew my dream classroom." Rachel knelt down, smiling. "That's amazing. What do you want to be when you grow up?" The boy's eyes lit up. "A teacher. Like Lena, ma'am." Rachel felt something stir inside her. Not sadness. Not guilt. Just clarity. As the day went on, she joined them in small activities, reading stories, helping draw, listening to the kids' dreams. Hours passed without her checking her phone once. By late afternoon, she and Michael sat on a bench watching the sunset paint the sky orange. The children had gone home. The air was peaceful. Rachel spoke softly. "I think I understand now." "Understand what?" he asked. "Why you stayed." He looked at her, curious. "You found purpose. The kind that doesn't need applause or validation? The kind that actually changes something." He nodded. That's all I ever wanted, she smiled. You know, I've spent years selling things that make people want more. But this, she gestured around them. This makes people feel enough. Michael leaned back. There's power in enough. They sat quietly for a while. The sound of crickets filled the air. Finally, Rachel said, I want to help. He turned to her. You already are. No, she said firmly. I mean really help. I can use my connections, pitch this project for funding, expand your visibility. You can scale this up. He thought for a moment, then smiled. All right. But only if we keep the heart intact. The purpose can't get lost in the paperwork. Deal, she said. Over the next few weeks, Rachel threw herself into the project. She contacted donors, created campaigns, wrote proposals, and pitched the story to foundations. Her presentation style changed. Less jargon, more humanity. People listened. Within 2 months, Michael's initiative secured a major education grant. 3 new centers opened. Local media started covering their work. Rachel attended every launch, not as a guest, but as a team member. During one of the openings, Michael pulled her aside. You're different now, she smiled. Maybe I'm finally working for something real, he nodded. I'm proud of you, she looked at him, feeling something more than gratitude. Respect, admiration, maybe even connection. That evening, as they drove back, Rachel watched the lights of small houses flicker through the window. Michael, she said softly, do you ever wonder if this is enough? If what we're doing will last? He smiled. Everything ends. But while it lasts, it matters. That's enough for me. Rachel leaned back, thinking about her old office, her luxury apartment, her empty routines. For the first time, she didn't miss them. She had found something better. And as the van rolled through the quiet countryside, she realized she wasn't following Michael's path. She was finally walking her own. A full year passed. The Lumen Education Initiative had grown beyond what anyone expected. What started as a quiet project tucked away in forgotten towns had become a national model for sustainable education. But for Rachel, the transformation went far beyond the numbers. She had left her corporate job 6 months ago. The decision shocked everyone at her firm. You're walking away from a 6-figure salary? Her boss had asked. She only smiled and said, I'm walking toward something that makes sense. Her days were now split between city meetings with sponsors and long trips to the field with Michael and the team. She learned to live with less. No designer clothes, no luxury coffee, no late-night boardroom sessions. And yet, she had never felt richer. One morning, as she sat in her small apartment surrounded by stacks of handwritten letters from children in the program, she caught herself smiling. Some letters were simple drawings, others short notes. Thank you for helping us get new. Books. Now I can use a computer. I want to teach kids like you one day. Each message felt like proof that her life was finally aligned with something meaningful. A few weeks later, Michael invited her to an event in the capital. The government had organized a conference on rural education reform. They wanted Lumen to share its success story. Michael asked Rachel to handle the presentation. Me, she said surprised. He nodded. You tell stories better than anyone. And this one's ours? She hesitated. Michael, you're the founder. People want to hear you. He smiled. They've already heard me. It's your turn. The conference hall was packed. Rows of officials, educators, journalists, and business leaders filled the seats. Cameras flashed. Microphones lined the stage. Rachel stood behind the podium, her hands trembling slightly. A year ago, she would have rehearsed every line, worried about her image, checked her appearance a dozen times. Now she simply took a deep breath and began. Good morning. My name is Rachel Lynn, and I'm part of the Lumen Education Initiative. We work in communities that most maps forget exist. Our mission is simple, to make sure every child can learn, no matter where they're born. Her voice was calm. Grounded, she clicked to the next slide, a photo of children under a tin roof classroom. Smiling. This is what success looks like, she said. Not glass offices or global awards, but eyes that light up when learning finally makes sense. The audience leaned in. She told them about the teachers like Lena, who taught without electricity until solar panels arrived, about the parents who walked 5 miles to attend literacy classes, about the children who could now read, code and dream. Then she paused and said, "None of this would have happened without one man's belief that small work can create big change." She looked at Michael sitting in the front row. He smiled faintly, almost embarrassed by the attention. Rachel continued, "He taught me something I never learned in business school. That ambition isn't wrong, but it's empty without meaning. That the loudest people in the room aren't always the ones who change the world. Sometimes it's the quiet ones who just keep doing the work." When she finished, the room was silent for a few seconds before applause filled the hall. Michael stood, clapping softly. He didn't need to speak. The moment spoke for him. Later, outside the conference, Rachel and Michael sat on the steps watching people leave. "You were brilliant," he said. She smiled. "I just told the truth," he nodded. "That's all stories ever need." They sat quietly for a while. The evening sun cast long shadows across the city skyline. Rachel spoke softly. "Do you ever think about how far this has come?" Michael chuckled. "Sometimes, but I try not to count. The moment you start counting, you stop doing." She looked at him. "You really believe that?" "I do," he said. "Impact isn't measured in numbers. It's measured in lives," she smiled. "You sound like someone who should write a book," he laughed. "You sound like someone who should publish it." They both laughed, the kind of easy laughter that comes only from shared purpose. Months passed. The project expanded into 10 more towns. Rachel became one of its main leaders, bridging communication between donors, teachers, and communities. She had found balance. She worked, but without the pressure of endless competition. She traveled, but not to escape anything. And she smiled, often without reason. One evening, she and Michael visited a new center being built near the coast. The sky was painted in gold and violet. Children were helping decorate the walls with their drawings. Rachel watched them and said, "You know, I used to think legacy meant leaving your name somewhere." Michael looked at her. "And now?" She smiled. "Now I think it means leaving something that keeps growing even when you're gone." He nodded slowly. "That's the kind that lasts." As they stood there, the sound of waves mixing with children's laughter, Rachel realized something else. A year ago, she had wanted to prove her worth. Now she wanted to pass it on. She turned to Michael. "Thank you." "For what?" "For showing me what matters," he smiled. "You found it yourself." I just pointed the way. The sun dipped below the horizon. The first lights flickered on inside the new classroom. Rachel whispered, "Do you ever think we'll stop?" Michael shook his head. "As long as there's one child left to teach, no." She nodded, feeling the truth in that. For the first time in her life, she wasn't chasing success. She was living it. A few months later, at another small event, a young woman approached Rachel. She looked nervous, holding a notebook. "Ma'am," she said, "I used to see your ads on TV. You worked in marketing, right?" Rachel smiled. "I did." The woman hesitated. "Why did you leave?" "You were at the top." Rachel thought for a moment, then said quietly, "Because I realized the top isn't always where life happens. Sometimes it's where you stop seeing what's real." The girl nodded slowly, her eyes thoughtful. "I want to do what you do someday." Rachel smiled warmly. "You will. Just remember, your work doesn't have to be loud to matter. It just has to be true." That night, Rachel sat by the sea outside the learning center, notebook in hand. She began writing something, notes, reflections, stories from the journey. On the first page, she wrote a line that captured everything she had learned. Success is not when the world knows your name. It's when someone else's life is better because you lived. She closed the notebook, listening to the waves. Somewhere behind her, children were still laughing. And she knew, deep down, that this was the kind of success she would never trade for anything. Because she had found her legacy, and it was alive.